Welcome back to Goblin-Inc. I'm Bruce Cruz, and today we're going to be looking at what I consider to be the strongest sorcerer build of 0.3, which is Spark cast on Crit Arc. This build is able to clear screens with ease, while also being able to absolutely destroy bosses, as you can see from these various clips. This build does insane damage, while also having the ability to clear off screen. The way that this is working, fundamentally, is that we're casting sparks with a bunch of increased projectile speed and a bunch of increased duration, and then giving our spark loads of crit chance so that each cast of spark is hitting every enemy many times, and that does quite a bit of damage. But at the same time, it's going to be ramping our cast on crit to cast out these huge lightning infused arcs that are going to be deleting the entire screen, or in the case of bosses, absolutely ripping bosses to pieces. Now, this build in its final in-game version does have fairly steep gear requirements, but I've been playing this build intermittently throughout the season, testing it at various breakpoints, and I'm going to teach you guys a setup that is able to be played with much less gear than what I have, and it's a build that is able to kill tier 3 Zesh and clear T15 maps with absolute ease. So we're going to be talking about both the in-game Penta ultimate version of the build, where it just destroys everything, and we're also going to be talking about the intermittent build that you can play while you're building towards that is still going to be able to clear all content in the game pretty easily. Let's start by talking about our Spark, because the Spark is the most important skill in this build. So we're always going to be running this efficiency support gem because the cost of Spark is so brutal in single target. Mana is going to end up being the main limiter of this build. When I'm talking about, like, you know, the intermittent version of the build versus the full in-game version of the build versus, like, you know, when you should even swap from Arc at all, the main limiting factor of this build by far is mana. You need as much mana, maximum mana, and as much mana regen as you can possibly get, and as part of that, we need to run efficiency on our Spark so that we're able to conserve mana on its cast. Pierce 3 is also like a required thing because the pierces are going to allow you to hit additional times, right? Because each spark can hit the same enemy many times, but, you know, without Pierce 3, it will get, you know, removed from the game before it's able to do that. So Pierce 3 is very strong. We're also running Pinpoint Critical because we are running the Malagora's Visitros, whatever the hell those are called, and those gloves are going to set our crit damage to 250%, and it can't be modified, which means you're able to run Pinpoint Critical for just 60% more crit hit chance. Obviously very strong when we're playing a cast on crit build. Now, up next, I generally run Projectile Acceleration because it's going to give you 40% more projectile speed while also giving you a slight increase to damage based on projectile speed. However, if you're able to get to crazy amounts of cast speed, if you have like cast speed on all of your gear, you can actually run Valenta's Propulsion, which is going to make it travel even faster, but you need crazy amounts of attack speed for this to be good. So in general, I just recommend you go Projectile Acceleration. Now, for your last support gem, for most of you guys, I suggest that you run Deliberation. If you're trying to map as fast as possible, you can replace Deliberation with Mobility. Once you have quite a bit of damage, you can drop it, and you'll be able to pretty significantly increase your map clear time, actually. Deliberation is going to be your best damage option. However, the true best in slot gem is going to be Dialy's Desire, because it's going to give plus 10% quality, which is equivalent to 15% projectile speed, which is one of the strongest stats we can get in this build, and it's also going to reduce the mana cost while giving it a +1 rank to skill. So Dialy's Desire, very strong, but it is pretty expensive. So if you don't have one of these, perfectly fine, just run Deliberation. I just bought mine today, so build still works very well without it, but obviously very good. Now, we also need to talk about our cast on crit setup. Dude, I tested so many versions of the cast on crit setup. You guys have, it's crazy. I've never had to test so much with one build. This build was so hard to optimize. But in general, for mapping, what I like to do now is I run Arc with Scion's Temper and Pinpoint Critical. One option you have is to, instead of running Scion's Temper, to run double Arc with Pinpoint Critical, which will give you like better single targets. So when you would do this is when like yellow mobs are living like a little bit too long. That's when I would run the double Arc. But in general, I prefer Scion's Temper. Now for bossing, we're always going to drop Scion's Temper. Like when you go to kill Zesh and stuff, always drop Scion's Temper for Deliberation for the increased damage. But in general, Scion's Temper is very good. We're also slapping on Pinpoint Critical, of course, for the 60% more crit chance. And then we're running Boundless Energy plus Energy Retention for essentially increased energy generation. Now, One of the things that I didn't really figure out how strong it was until more recently is how strong these meta support passives are. Because in single target, yes, our Spark does some damage, but the vast majority of our damage is going to be Arc. Arc is probably like 75 or 80% of our damage in single target, and so we really want to run these meta supports. And this one in particular is extremely strong. Evocational Practitioner, because it's going to give us 35% crit chance and 25% increased energy generation. And that 35% crit chance is applying to both our Spark and our Arcs. So it's a huge damage multiplier on Arc, while also allowing our Spark to crit more, which gives us more Arcs. So as you can kind of see, when you start to look at these different pieces, this build is a massive balancing act between mana generation, mana spending, and crit chance. Essentially, more crit chance is going to equivocate to more Arc cast, which is going to drain your mana more. So the more crit chance you're able to get, you need to get more mana to be able to afford it. And at the same time, you also have spellcasting speed, which has a very similar effect, where the more arcs you have out, the more sparks you have out, the more arcs you're going to proc. So you're like essentially double dipping in mana spent, and that's why mana is so important in this build. We are running as much mana as we can possibly get on every aspect, to the point where we're even dropping melding, right? Because we just need as much mana as we can possibly get. If you're still having mana problems, like if you're trying this setup and you're fighting bosses and you find like, holy smokes, I just cannot afford this, just drop Scion's Temper for efficiency. And bam, your mana problems will almost be like instantly solved, as long as you have a few mana rolls on gear. So just keep in mind, don't be afraid to throw efficiency on your cast on crit Arc if you're having big mana problems. Once you get a few pieces of gear, slap in Scion's Temper for the AoE, slap in Deliberation for single target. Now, another important piece of this build is Orb of Storms. Orb of Storms is going to be our main source of remnant generation in single target, and we need to generate a lot of remnants because of how much we're able to proc our arcs. And so as part of this, we have increased limit to Orb of Storms, so we can ramp 2 out at once. We're also running Harmonic Remnants, which is going to allow us to have a 20% chance to generate additional remnant whenever one spawns. And because our Arc has such fast cast speed, we're able to eat through these Orb of Storms very quickly, because we only have to cast 5 spells in order to eat through the Orbs of Storms. So this means we're able to eat through our Orbs of Storms very fast, and we're also able to run Shock Chance and Lightning Exposure on them so that they're able to apply Lightning Exposure. So they're going to be applying Lightning Exposure for us while also generating Lightning Infusions. And remember, Lightning Infusions are going to be tripling the damage on arcs, right? This is a very important piece of the build. As part of this too, that Lightning Exposure is extremely important because we're running Exposed to the Storm. This is going to give us a 30% increased crit chance against enemies with Exposure. That is very, very strong. Obviously, as we described before, increased crit chance is a huge damage multiplier. So this Orb of Storm setup is pretty important. Up next, we're going to talk about something fairly dangerous, okay? It's something that you should only be really focused on when you become very comfortable with the build and very comfortable with your mana costs, okay? And that is Mana Tempest. In single target, because of the way this build works, if you have Mana Tempest out when the boss spawns and you've already got all your sparks ramped and you've already got all your lightning infusions ramped up as well, this Mana Tempest will practically double your damage, but it's going to instantly destroy your entire mana bar. Essentially, what Mana Tempest does is it allows you to burst significantly harder, but it massively shrinks the window that you're able to do damage during, okay? But if you're looking for like the fastest, one-shot boss kills you can possibly get, they're going to involve Mana Tempest. But in general, Mana Tempest is actually a DPS decrease. It's just in that initial window when you get the Mana Tempest out, the damage increase is absolutely crazy. So use Mana Tempest at your own peril. If you're someone who is already struggling with mana, don't even bother. But if you've got a lot of decent mana generation and stuff, feel free to look into Mana Tempest. Now, I really want to talk about another important thing that I figured out. So when I was playing this build, okay, I spent most of my time, not most, but like half of my time, let's say, playing group, 6-man Giga Juice content where we're doing like 100 plus delirium, like 6 mod maps with like all these overlapping towers, and the content is very challenging, and because there's 6 players, it's scaled very hard. Also, when you're low gear, obviously your damage is going to be quite a bit worse. And so this next thing I'm going to show you is going to be the thing that I play in 6-man content, and it's something that I recommend you to do if you're struggling with AoE. So what this is going to look like is taking Elemental Equilibrium so that infusion resonates you create are always random. Then we're going to couple that with Refracted Infusion, which is going to give you a 50% chance when you pick up an Elemental Infusion to instead get a different one. As part of this, we're going to be dropping Storm's Recollection and instead taking Refracted Infusion. The result of this change is that we're able to generate cold infusions very easily, and these cold infusions are going to be doing insane amounts of damage with our sparks. Cold infused sparks do triple damage while summoning significantly more projectiles. And it's also going to allow you to generate a lot of lightning infusions at the same time because you're converting your fire and cold infusions into lightning as well. As part of this, we're running snap, because essentially what's going to happen is when you kill a pack, everything's going to be shocked, and then you snap it, and that snap is going to generate a bunch of cold infusions and a bunch of lightning infusions. So if you find yourself struggling with area of effect damage, swap to Refracted Infusion, slap on Elemental Equilibrium, and then you can start spamming out cold infusions. Very cool little tech. But for me, my damage is so high, I don't even need to bother with this anymore because I can just kill stuff with my normal spark at this point. Next, let's talk about the kind of gameplay rotation and how to play the build at different points. So in AoE, you're basically just going to be spamming sparks, and then after stuff dies, we're just going to snap in order to generate, lightning infusions for our arcs. And if you're playing the Elemental Equilibrium setup, it's also going to generate your cold infusions for your sparks. And so, our AoE is literally just spark, and then snap when things die, and that's it. And we're going to be clearing entire screens doing that. Now, for single target, there's a lot more that you can do to massively increase your damage. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we want to always be generating lightning infusions. So we're always going to start a boss fight by dropping 2 Orb of Storms and just spamming spamming sparks in order to generate a bunch of lightning infusions. You really want to do this before you do like Zesh or any boss you can control when it spawns. That's also going to be a hard fight because more lightning infusions equals more damage. Now, the next combo piece is going to be Sigil of Power. So Sigil of Power is very strong, and it's going to give you up to, maximum 4 stages, 15% more damage per stage, so 60% damage. That's a crazy amount of damage, and it's very worth having the weapon swap for a Chiming Staff in order to get that out. Just make sure on all of your skills that are all bound to weapon set 1 so that you can drop the Sigil of Power and instantly swap back to your wand. So that's going to be another 60% damage boof. Boof. Another 60% damage buff. The next piece is going to be Elemental Weakness. Elemental Weakness, very simple, just reduces the enemy resistances. Very important to cast, especially on like Zesh and stuff, but in general for bosses, if they have a bunch of resistance, it's going to be a huge damage increase, and if they have no resistances, it's still going to be a decent damage increase because it's going to take them negative. So, at this point, it's, Orb of Storms to generate some infusions, drop Sigil of Power. As the boss spawns, we're going to drop Elemental Weakness, and then we're going to go back to spamming sparks. The last piece is to make sure you pre-ramp your sparks, because obviously, like if I stop casting here, my sparks keep going, right? So you want to have your sparks ramped before the boss spawns. And then, if you want to play the hard mode version, as soon as the boss spawns, when all of these pieces are going, we're going to press Mana Tempest. And then we're only going to cast like 2 to 3 more sparks, and all of the existing sparks plus the 2 to 3 we cast is going to eat our entire mana bar in half a second because of how many arcs it's going to be casting, but it's going to do a billion damage as we spam pick up all these lightning infusions, and kaboom, there goes the boss. Now, if that was a lot of information, don't fret about it. This build is plenty strong without having to do like the full rotation correctly. In general, just, make sure you're generating your lightning infusions. Try to remember to curse the boss, throw out a Sigil of Power, and just blast out sparks, and it's going to work out just fine. Next up, let's talk about items. So your items, the most important stats for damage are going to be increased ranks of lightning spells on your weapon, increased either projectile skills, because both arc and spark are projectiles, or increased ranks of spell skills on your necklace. And on the focus, we're looking for ranks of spell skills. By far the best way to scale your damage. Your next most important thing is to get as much increased damage as you can between your weapon and your focus. That's also going to be a huge damage increase. Once you get those things, look for as much mana as you can get on everything. You need an unbelievable amount of mana. There's no limit to how much mana you can have. You can see even with my build, I don't have enough mana. You always need more mana, okay? So then you get as much mana as you can possibly get. Then once you've stacked as much mana as you can, start looking for your crit chance rolls, because the crit chance is going to allow you to spend your mana even faster and give you even more damage. And that's pretty much what the gearing priority looks like. Aside from that, like on our chest piece, you know, we just want as much ES as possible, as much resistances as possible. Pretty normal stuff. Movement speed on boots, all that normal stuff. But yeah, to summarize that, just get as much damage as you can, then scale your mana as hard as you can, and then get as much crit chance as you can, and fill in your defensive stats as needed. We're also going to be running the Darkness Enthroned unique belt for the 76% increased magnitude of shock, which is a huge damage increase because of Strike Twice, allowing us to apply 2 shocks. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Build link is down below. Hopefully, you guys have as much fun as I do with this build. I love this build. It's one of my favorite builds I've ever played. And let me know in the comments down below how the build goes for you. So I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.